The moment you realize you've been living someone else's war, everything changes. Not in the dramatic way movies promise, but in the quiet, terrifying way that truth always arrives. You wake up one morning and understand that every battle you've fought, every victory you've celebrated, every defeat that crushed you, was never really yours. You were a soldier in an army you never enlisted in, fighting for generals whose names you don't even know. This realization came to me while reading Sun Tzu's The Art of War for the third time, but truly understanding it for the first. The ancient Chinese strategist wasn't writing about military campaigns or battlefield tactics. He was writing about the invisible war that governs every moment of human existence, the war between who you are and who the world demands you to be, the war between your authentic self and the puppet strings of social conditioning, the war between clarity and the comfortable delusions that keep us functioning in a system designed to consume us. Sun Tzu understood something that modern psychology is only beginning to grasp. Most human suffering comes not from external circumstances, but from our inability to see clearly. We fight the wrong battles, at the wrong times, with the wrong weapons, against the wrong enemies. We exhaust ourselves in conflicts that were never meant to be won, while the real war, the one that determines the quality of our entire existence, rages on unnoticed. The first principle of Sun Tzu's philosophy cuts through centuries of human self-deception. All warfare is based on deception. This isn't a cynical observation about human nature. It's a diagnostic tool for understanding reality. Every interaction you have, every relationship you build, every career move you make exists within a web of carefully constructed illusions. People present versions of themselves that bear little resemblance to their inner experience. Corporations sell dreams while harvesting data. Governments promise security while creating the very chaos they claim to protect us from. But here's the devastating truth that most people never grasp. The deepest deception isn't what others do to you. It's what you do to yourself. Every time you say, "I'm fine," when you're breaking inside, every time you smile when you want to scream, every time you agree when you want to rebel, you're participating in the very system of deception that keeps you trapped. You become both the deceiver and the deceived, both the prisoner and the guard. Sun Tzu's genius wasn't in recognizing this universal deception. His genius was in developing a strategy for navigating it without losing your soul. He understood that in a world built on lies, the man who sees clearly becomes dangerous. Not because he wants to harm others, but because he refuses to be harmed by illusions. He becomes untouchable, not through aggression, but through understanding. He wins not by fighting every battle, but by choosing only the battles worth fighting. The strategy begins with the most difficult thing a human being can do. Know yourself completely. Not the version of yourself you show to the world, not the version you wish you were, not the version your parents wanted you to be, but the raw, unfiltered truth of who you actually are. Your strengths, your weaknesses, your fears, your desires, your patterns, your blind spots. Sun Tzu called this knowing your ground. Without this knowledge, every external battle becomes a setup for internal defeat. Most men live their entire lives without ever knowing themselves. They know their job title, their relationship status, their political affiliations, their favorite sports teams, but they don't know the deeper currents that drive their decisions. They don't understand why they choose certain partners, why they sabotage certain opportunities, why they feel empty after achieving goals they thought they wanted. They fight external enemies while the real enemy, their own unconscious patterns, wages war from within. The man who knows himself becomes strategically dangerous because he can't be manipulated by his own weaknesses. When someone tries to trigger his insecurities, he sees the attempt clearly and chooses his response consciously. When society offers him hollow rewards, he recognizes the trade-off and decides whether it's worth making. When his own mind creates stories about what he needs to be happy, he questions the narrative instead of blindly following it. This self-knowledge leads to Sun Tzu's most counterintuitive principle. The supreme art of war is to subdue the enemy without fighting. In a culture that glorifies conflict, that turns every disagreement into a battle that must be won, this philosophy seems almost passive. But it's the opposite of passive. It's the most active thing you can do, because it requires you to transcend your ego's need to be right, to be validated, to be seen as powerful. To win without fighting means you've developed something rare in human beings, the ability to see the bigger picture. You understand that winning an argument while losing respect is a strategic failure. You understand that proving your point while damaging a relationship is a Pyrrhic victory. You understand that being right while creating enemies is a long-term loss, disguised as a short-term win. The man who has mastered this principle moves through life like water through stone. He doesn't fight the obstacle directly. He finds the path around it. He doesn't engage every provocation. He chooses his battles with surgical precision. He doesn't need to prove his strength. His strength is evident in his restraint. He becomes what Sun Tzu called formless, impossible to attack because he presents no unnecessary targets. This formlessness isn't about being weak or passive. It's about being strategically invisible. In a world where everyone is performing their personality, desperately trying to be seen and validated, the man who reveals nothing becomes magnetic. People are drawn to mystery, to depth, to the person who doesn't need their approval. His power comes not from what he shows, but from what he withholds. Sun Tzu understood that attention is the currency of power, and most people spend it carelessly. They broadcast their every thought, react to every stimulus, engage in every trivial conflict. They make themselves completely readable, completely predictable, completely vulnerable. The strategic man, by contrast, guards his attention like a finite resource. He speaks when his words have weight, acts when his actions have purpose, reveals himself when revelation serves his deeper objectives. This isn't about becoming cold or calculating. It's about becoming conscious. It's about recognizing that every interaction is an energy exchange, and most people are unconscious about how they're spending their energy. They give it away to people who don't deserve it, waste it on problems they can't solve, squander it on emotions they can't control. The man who has learned Sun Tzu's lessons becomes a master of energy conservation, spending his life force only on what truly matters. The deepest warfare happens not between you and other people, but between you and your own conditioning. Every day you're bombarded with messages about who you should be, what you should want, how you should live. These messages come from advertising, social media, family expectations, cultural norms, peer pressure. They're designed to make you dissatisfied with who you are, so you'll buy products, seek validation, conform to systems that benefit others more than they benefit you. The man who fights this war consciously begins to see through these manufactured desires. He questions why he wants what he wants. He examines whether his goals are truly his own, or simply the goals that were programmed into him. He develops what Sun Tzu called strategic patience, the ability to wait for the right opportunity rather than rushing into action because he feels he should. This patience isn't procrastination or indecision. It's the confidence that comes from knowing your own timing, understanding that forced action often leads to forced results. The strategic man watches, waits, prepares, and then moves with precision when the moment is right. He doesn't need to prove himself through constant action. He proves himself through effective action. Sun Tzu's philosophy reveals something profound about human nature. Most of our suffering comes from fighting battles we're not meant to fight. We exhaust ourselves, trying to change people who don't want to change, trying to control outcomes that aren't within our control, trying to win approval from people whose opinion doesn't actually matter. We waste our precious life energy on conflicts that exist only in our minds, problems that would solve themselves if we simply stopped feeding them with our attention. The strategic man learns to identify these false battles and withdraw from them. He doesn't engage in arguments that have no resolution, doesn't invest in relationships that consistently drain him, doesn't pursue goals that conflict with his deeper values. He becomes ruthless about protecting his energy, not because he's selfish, but because he understands that his energy is his most valuable resource. This ruthlessness extends to his relationship with himself. He stops tolerating his own self-defeating patterns, stops making excuses for behaviors that sabotage his success, stops accepting mediocrity as inevitable. He wages war against his own weakness, not through harsh self-criticism, but through conscious choice. He chooses courage over comfort, growth over stagnation, truth over pleasant lies. The man who masters these principles begins to operate from a different level of consciousness. He sees through the theater of human interaction to the underlying dynamics. He recognizes manipulation before it can affect him, spots opportunities before others notice them, anticipates problems before they become crises. He develops what Sun Tzu called divine manipulation, the ability to shape circumstances through understanding rather than force. This isn't about becoming manipulative in the shallow sense. It's about becoming conscious of the forces that shape human behavior, including your own. When you understand why people do what they do, you can respond to their deeper needs rather than their surface demands. When you understand your own patterns, you can choose your responses rather than being driven by unconscious reactions. The ultimate victory in Sun Tzu's system isn't defeating your enemies. It's making enemies unnecessary. It's developing such clarity about your own path that external conflicts become irrelevant. It's becoming so aligned with your authentic self that you don't need to fight for validation, approval, or recognition. You become complete within yourself. And from that completeness, you can engage with the world without being consumed by it. This completeness doesn't mean isolation or withdrawal from life. It means engagement from a place of strength rather than need. The man who has won the internal war can participate in external conflicts without losing himself in them. He can care about outcomes without being attached to them. He can invest in relationships without being dependent on them. He can pursue goals without being defined by them. Sun Tzu's final teaching is perhaps his most profound. The greatest warrior is the one who never needs to fight, not because he's weak, but because he's become so clear about what's worth fighting for that most conflicts reveal themselves as illusions. He's developed such mastery over his own mind that external circumstances can't disturb his inner peace. He's learned to win the only battle that really matters, the battle for his own soul. In a world that profits from your confusion, clarity becomes a revolutionary act. In a system that depends on your desperation, contentment becomes rebellion. In a culture that feeds on your insecurity, self-knowledge becomes power. The man who truly understands Sun Tzu's teachings doesn't just become a better strategist, he becomes a free human being, and freedom is the most dangerous thing of all.